Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The LEC week is over. We had some banger games. Let's not, waste any time. Let's jump right into it. XL versus Astralis. Interesting draft approach from XL. They tried to go for the Nautilus Draven. Targamas on Nautilus is not something that really, jogs my memory in a positive way. Draven Patrick, something we've seen. Talia against Silas, perfectly fine. And then they had Kesante and Sejuani. On the other hand, we saw Nar and, of course, the Trundle. I thought the Trundle here was quite genius. Really like the Trundle here. Trundle's interaction with Kesante is so interesting because he buys very bulky stats, right? You ult him and, he loses so much of his juice when he ults, He loses his own stats and then the way Trundle just works together with Kesante is very interesting. And then the Trundle pillar is very disruptive. He's, of course, a juggernaut that can easily be kited, and I really like the Trundle. The Gnar also, decent matchup in the Kesante. Early game is kind of hard for Gnar, but then he scales into it. And then you had the Lucian Nami. What was the standout here? Of course, XL, they tried something different here. That's the story of each and every single game. They're just trying something different, hoping that something works. And nothing is working currently. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what is going wrong because, there is so little that is going right. XL, I think that they are doomed to be the 10th place team. And I think that is probably the biggest blessing to some of the other teams that are heavily underperforming. And one of them, of course, is Astralis. They took a win in this one. Very impressive play from Kobe and Yonghun because they're playing Lucian Nami into Draven Nautilus, and they were doing so well in lane. They got dove, they got protected by the TP, which was super good. They managed to secure the Herald first. This time around, also Finn had a fantastic game. I feel like Finn, he shows a lot of potential, but then there's these moments in the game where he just completely loses his mind. And this time around, he didn't lose his mind. What a joy to watch. Didn't lose his mind. Dejin once again, Kobe Yonghun, I think finally, they deserved to have a victory in the bank. I think, they've been playing so well. And then you had the flip side, they were diving both. Lucian Nami got ahead, and then I think just their composition was far more superior. Good luck for Astralis. I think that they can potentially play spoiler, but of course they're in a position where they need to win 3 games in a row. Same scoreline now as XL, and the head-to-head won't matter in most cases. If the head-to-head, like let's say they are split even with, let's say, XL for some reason, because both teams go 3-0 on the weekend, then, having head-to-head, if you're 9th and 8th split, it doesn't matter because, side selection and all. We continue, I think that game speaks for itself. They broke the bot tower with Rift Herald. Like, imagine playing Draven Nautilus and you lose your bot tower first. Just FF the game, right? But very tough look for XL. I almost said that they should FF the split, but, anything can happen. But odds are definitely against them. Copy. Next game was another banger. BDS, BDS. Jesus, BDS. They are cooking. They're playing some good League of Legends. Darius and Olaf looking great in the current meta, and this Darius game was another phenomenal performance by Adam. I think that you can go so far to say that Adam is in the conversation of the best top laner in Europe. I think Photon and Adam are by far the best performers, and I think that they are definitely on par. I think Adam has the most amount of solo kills. I think what's has been the biggest improvement for Adam is he still plays the crazy shit. He played the meta too. He played the Jax, right? And he manages, even in situations where he's playing Flash and Ghost, to coordinate together with his team, and they're finding ways to connect. In this game, he got 2 big ganks, he got far ahead, and then he transferred his pressure. He transfers his pressure super well. They're playing toward his side, they're hovering into him, he catches the neutral waves, pushes deeper, and then groups into mid. And Adam's skill participation for the majority of the early game, he was involved in everything that went down after the turret top broke. And this is, the biggest thing. BDS, they had some slip-ups here and there, they had the Nash, they threw a little bit. But the general identity of BDS in terms of how they play the macro game and how they are aware of each other and how they connect is a very beautiful thing. The main thing here is, once again, I think the fact that they've shown so many layers of gameplay in terms of bot lane champs, in terms of jungle champs, and also in terms of top lane champs, means that, you can't really easily go into BDS and like a matchup against BDS and ban out like the combo or whatever way they won games. Often in past splits, if a team that is kind of the underdog wins, usually is due to some kind of a recipe that works. And I feel like when you face up against BDS, it's very hard to find the right bans. Do you target the bot lane? Do you target Adam? Do you spend bans on the meta champions that are super, super strong? Or do you remove the Darius and Olaf? These are tough questions to ask and tough questions to answer. You have limited bans, and I feel like BDS is a onion with many layers. And I hope in this analogy, onions are good. They smell great when you cook them. You saute them and all that shit with butter. They taste great. They smell great. So it's not a negative thing. I don't even know if the analogy is a negative thing. We move on. They have many layers. We don't need to add onions into it. Okay? What else do we have in this game? Odo Amne. Sorry, not Odo Amne. Trying to remember who Adam solo boloed. I don't think he solo bowled this game. He didn't. He solo bowled Niski, actually. Niski got solo bowled. Yeah, on Mad Lions' side, I think the draft that they played was kind of rough. I think it's hard to find value with Trash. I think just Darius, like Santa Sejuani Akali, is such a weak top side. I think this is just a composition that doesn't have enough tools to do well. I think just not so many mechanics to come back into a game, and I think that you always have to think twice when you give up Maokai and Azir. I think in terms of control, I think they just contribute way too much in terms of space control, distance control, and I think that you can add so many different champions around these champions in order to succeed. And you give up the Maokai, you set up the Darius for success, and BDS is looking fantastic. Really, really strong. I'm so impressed by how they managed to maneuver themselves so well around Adam's Flash Ghost. Because usually that's the issue that you run into when it comes to, lacking TP on your top laner. But they are hovering into him, they're connected, they're playing on one side of the map. And I think this is a massive strength. It goes so far that maybe we will see more experimentation with different summoners in the top lane, because we have all gotten so used to playing with TP from our top laner. But having Flash and Ghost, it really, really, puts a lot of pressure on K'Sante, because obviously these summoners can be used aggressively. You ghost on the enemy, you burn his Flash, and maybe in some cases he can't even get away if he's past river, which we saw in this game with the Maokai and Darius ganks. Another thing that I wanted to highlight, because I think it's a player that I haven't talked too much about, I think Nuke. He had a very, very good performance. I think this game was very nice. Mad Lions' biggest strength is just how they're playing around Niski and how they're leveraging that strength and finding 2v2 kills and 2v1 kills. And this time around, there was a lot of shit thrown at the wall that Nucleant was standing in front of, because he was dodging ganks left and right. And I think this was a very, very big plus in my book. BDS is kind of looking like a complete and decent team. I wouldn't go so far to say that now, they're a contender for the title. We still need to see more, right? And we need to see how they adapt between metas and how, they're going to look when they're being pushed in best of 3s and best of 5s against the likes of G2 and Vitality. But that's the main thing, right? It's only the likes of G2 and Vitality. And below that, I think it's really, really up for grabs. And BDS is definitely in that conversation. Once again, really, really proud of Adam. That is fantastic growth. Really fantastic growth on the player side. Next game was I don't remember the game. I just remember SK. They got, oh, SK versus Koi. SK versus Koi was the one. Yeah, SK versus Koi. I think Koi, you know, they've shown for the majority of the year that they don't want to play Yumi. I think ever since they got Dove bot playing Jin Yumi against Mad Lions, they've never touched the champion again. And usually that's one of the trades that you see, right? Lucian, Nami traded for Yumi. Here, the enemy first pick Lucian, and I really like the first pick Lucian because Lucian Yumi is a very strong combo. And I think in cases where the enemy is showing first pick Lucian, stealing Nami away when Yumi is in the picture is not a real thing, in my opinion. And I think this ended up being, you know, a big problem. Exakick and DOS completely smashed Comp and Trimby. They're playing Nami Ezreal, which isn't like a lane that can fight back at all. The lane matchup is completely horrible. I don't know what Koi is doing in terms of their preparation, but it's definitely not a good look. Not a good look at all. Koi's only blessing is that some teams just manage to look worse somehow. And I think that the main conversation still is the format and how it's challenging the teams in a very different way, challenging players in a very, very different way. And these are metrics that we need to kind of look at as we progress and proceed in the rest of the year. I think things will get a lot easier for everyone to kind of consolidate their position in the league if they manage to get to the best of three portion. But the Super Week, 3 Super Weeks after each other is really a drain. I can assure you from experience, only playing 1 Super Week is already super, super draining. And you come into the next week, you end late, and then you need to like recover, and then you have to, you know, jump into the next matches, and you feel like you're playing catch up always after Super Week. But now it's really, really a snowball either in the positive direction or the negative direction, right? What else happened in this game? Of course, we had the Tristana that did pretty well. Tristana and the Maokai, they dove Akali on mid. But I think later on, Tristana was kind of struggling to find angles. So far, I'm not so sold about Tristana. I think that she looks decent in lane phase. Later on, I feel like a big part of her kit feels kind of outdated, as silly as it might sound. I think a lot of our animations are a little bit too slow, but maybe there's something that I'm missing there in regards to Tristana, because she does add that layer of finding like an AD mid, which is something that you welcome if you have the likes of Maokai and Nami in this case, right? So that part of it is neat. A big problem once again, it's like Koi had this fight that was very sporadic and all over the place, and then not BDS, SK aced them. And after that, I think SK were in full control of the game, and Koi showing time and time again that they're just not working together as a unit. They seem to have draft identity issues. They seem to have issues on the front of, how they're going to team fight and how to play together. I think the one saving grace, if I compare Koi to the likes of some of the other teams that are underperforming, is just Malrang. I am still enjoying what Malrang is bringing to the table, and I think that he is giving a lot of space to the individuals to potentially do something positive in the game. But when they're playing against teams that are well coordinated, they have to face the fact that they need to have coordination too, and you can't really cheat your way out of that. And when Koi don't have a strong bot lane matchup, they definitely lose a lot of their horse force. Why is it called horsepower when horse force was right there in front of your nose? I think I should make a petition to fix that. Akali Blind was also clever, with Silas and Azir banned in 4-5. It seemed like the Tristana on 5 was something that Larsen wanted to invite. In the end, he couldn't carry even with his advantage. Not finally, but surprising that it's not finally, G2 versus Vitality. I think here, Vitality definitely outdrafted the opposition. So what was the main concern, right? If you think of the weapons that G2 has shown so far, it's just a very, very strong early game. I think the Kalista ban maybe is not so necessary, but you can play it safe. They removed the Draven, and they just slammed Ashe of Ours 1-2. Ashe Varus, very strong lane phase, and also a very fundamental thing that Ashe provides is, of course, her Ashe E. Ashe E is going to tell you a lot about what the enemy jungle is planning, which side he's going to play towards, and leveraging that information for a strong jungler like Bo and to secure the lanes definitely reduces a lot of the plays that G2 can do in the early game. So they remove the Draven, remove the Kalista, Melokin, the strong bot lane 1-2. I think this was super good. On 3, they just matched. Well, basically, they just picked jungle and continued to ban junglers. They were perfectly fine, dropping mid. They had the Cassiopeia prepared into the Rise. You know, Cassiopeia into Lucian, Nami, Rise, I don't think it's like a super, you know, super winning pick. I think it's a fine, like, denial into Rise. But the strangest thing here happened for G2 is that they dropped an Udyr and a K'Sante. So a big part of this, right, is the biggest weakness in my mind on blue side right now is the fact that you have to blind pick top. I think in cases where you can't pick Jax, you're definitely worse off in most cases, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about red side later, but this is a good kind of conversation starter around it because K'Sante is not so great to pick into Cassio, not so great to pick into Ashe Varus either, right? Already long range, a lot of slows already that you have to walk through, very hard to access anybody really, right? K'Sante is decent into Vi, but Vi can play accordingly to her teammates, right? She can always choose if she decides to ult in or go in or Q in, right? And then finally, you invite the Gwen. So K'Sante and Udyr very similar, right, in champions, if you think about it. They're juggernauts, very beefy, good damage output, but they are short-range melee that leverage, you know, move speed to access the opposition. Even though I love Udyr, I think it's one of the strongest junglers in the game, honestly, and I'm surprised we don't see more of it. I think this was a horrible spot for Udyr. Gwen is a champion that is often picked into K'Sante. And if you're planning to pick Udyr, the only champion that was really good into here is the Vi. You can argue that it's fine into Varus too if he wants to go lethality, but all in all, this is a lot of champions with a lot of slows and also a lot of DPS on tanks. Tanks are very weak into Cassio and Gwen. And I think that Vitality, they outdrafted them, like plain and simple, complete outdraft, right? The Lucian Nami came in against Ashe Varus, which I think did fine, right? But they couldn't really carry the game because in the end, you know, it's so much. It's like they are the only ones that can push you forward. Like Hansam was doing his absolute best to try to find like cullings that are going to like break the position. But the issue is, it's like there's Vi pressuring you, Ashe arrows, Varus ults. Gwen can also W and push you forward, and your teammates can't really support you in that because Ryze, Udyr, and K'Sante are very low range, and they are all relatively tanky, but the enemy team just shred tanks with their top side. And another layer to this, right, is G2, the only hope they have is that if they win early game, like they have to snowball early game super hard, leverage how strong Ryze and Udyr is in early fights. But with the Ashe denying a lot of that and Bo just brilliantly finding gank timers, Vitality managed to have the biggest outdraft that we've seen in a long time, and also at the same time one of the strongest early games that Vitality have shown so far. Bo is incredibly precise. I think that this was a fantastic game from Vitality. And very interesting how this is going to develop, right? Because G2, I think they got kind of exposed here. You know, I think blue side is very tricky to draft because in the end, I guess we can just start this conversation about red side. So I mentioned already blind picking top is super hard. One other layer to red side is that you can full pick bot lanes on 1-2. You can pick combos and you can deny the enemy combos. Enemy first picks Ashe, you can choose to pick Dinger, you can choose to pick Varus. You can always choose which direction you want to go to by fully picking both sides or by choosing to counter support on 3 or picking AD on 3, right? This already gives you a lot of options. In a lot of cases too, if the enemy is first picking 1 to deny that 1-2 full combo for you, you most of the time on red side get the strongest jungler, unless of course Maokai is in the picture and the enemy is willing to trade, for example, Yumi Lucian. And then of course on 4-5, on 4 in most cases, if you think about the mid lane meta is shaped in a way where it's like Azir and then whatever else comes after, right? And in a lot of spots, some of the answers into Azir are much weaker. Sometimes Akali is worse. Sometimes Kassadin doesn't make sense. Sometimes, Victor is very weak. And Azir is such a strong and solid blind pick that barely has any weaknesses. And if there are situations where he goes through in the draft and he drops into 4-5, he just has such a good time in most games. The main thing here is that most teams don't have room to pick mid 1, 2, 3 because dropping jungle in a lot of cases is awkward, right? We mentioned it. They dropped, of course, mid and Ryze was picked. They banned Azir and Syndra and Cassiopeia was locked. And then they have the Gwen on 5. So all in all, like red side, I repeat, you can pick mid on 4 and then you can counter pick top. Blind picking top is really, really hard when Jax is out. And we see a lot of K'Sante blind, but K'Sante is losing super, super much when he's being blind picked. You have many different answers into K'Sante that can be very good for the game. And I think that's why K'Sante's win ratio is so low. I think that's also why, blue side win ratio is so incredibly low. The last time I checked, it was around 70% in the LEC, which is insanity. I hope we can pull up the statistics on screen. I'll make sure to link that to Tenki so we can pull it up and we can know in real time if I exaggerated or maybe the number changed. Either way, red side is looking mighty, mighty OP, which makes this format once again a lot crazier. Final game of the day, we had Team Heretics versus Fnatic. Two very predictable draft ideas. I think that I did the draft in the studio and I was reviewing it because I was on the analyst desk, and I think I pretty much predicted every single thing that would happen.
I wonder here if Fnatic are going to drop support to just invite the Lulu and then just play an all-in support for Rux in the shape of Leona, Nautilus, and Momo, because I think that's where he's going to be super, super comfortable. Maybe just lock in your Azir or your Ryze and then your jungle, drop support together with top and hope that you get the K'Sante invitation to then counter-pick it, because I think that's such a powerful part about the red side, but Team Heretics really like the K'Sante, so... I think the danger still is, like, if they really want to go for the melee support, I think they kind of want to invite the Lulu. I think that the Braum is what becomes dangerous there on 5 if they pick it. Team Heretics, with this Gragas ban, I think they might just look for a Jax on 4, and if Jax gets banned, just pick K'Sante right after that and 5 pick support.
Really up to Fnatic to see which one of them is going to stay above the water. It's actually going to be the Jax, so that comes through the thought process that you're kind of allowing there as well, Yamato, with some of these champions still being available. Of course, both K'Sante and Lulu now available if that's what you're really looking for, and really up to Team Heretics to see where did they put that counter pick position, and it is going to go all the ways down to the support pick.
And we saw a lot of answers to K'Sante, so which one is Fnatic going to take here?
I think we probably will see a Gwen. Wunder really likes the Gwen, and we saw it do super, super well in the previous game. It's a classic that Wunder likes to go to. Maybe it goes for just a little tank to keep it simple, but maybe just a Gwen, a Leona to round it off. The enemy is going to buy MR, but that's perfectly fine. You allow it.
You already have some decent hard engage to come through as well. Leona, though, is a power pick from Rocks. We saw how he performed on it on Worlds as well. It was one of his comfort picks. It has been for the longest times as well in the ERLs too. And now it's really on Heretics. Do you just say, all right, we'll try and go into it with the hard engage to come through? Or do you feel like you want to go for the disengage with a Braum on 5?
It has to be Braum. Braum is so good here. Gwen can fight back, of course, but Braum is so good into all of the champions that are being shown here. There's no other option. This is such a juicer here on 5 pick.
Bro, are you a coach or something?
Unemployed.
I was surprised that Varus wasn't banned. I'm really curious what Reckless is going to play if Varus is out. Like, is he going to blind pick Jhin? Maybe he's going to blind pick Jhin, or like, because blind pick Sivir is just not a thing. They went to first pick Varus, Zeri Wukong 1-2 lock-in, and then the plan was to just counter pick support for bot. I think that it was easy for Team Heretics to play around with the idea of the enemy pretty much relying on melee supports after what they showed in the previous day. Of course, here, Fnatic look in Vi and Rise, showing that they want to drop support and see what kind of happens with the pool. They wanted to invite the enemy to pick Lulu and to just pick a melee support into it, right? There's a Momo, Nautilus, Leona, there's 3. They're not going to be all banned because the enemy has only 2 bans in 4-5. And then a really, really important detail here, what Team Heretics did. The moment they banned Gragas, they also they removed the answer that Wunder has into Jax. And that provoked a Jax ban. And just because they provoked that Jax ban, Ebi got his Kesante, as per usual. He's happy with that. And another thing is that they remove Fnatic's ability to ban Braum. Renata, Braum are the go-to bans if you're planning to blind pick a melee support, because they are just too insane and too powerful against melee supports. You saw the same thing in 1-2-3. Even though, as far as I know, Mercer hasn't shown any Heimerdinger play, they banned Heimerdinger 1-2-3, which once again signals that you want to so heavily play a melee all-in support, because Heimerdinger, Renata, Braum is like the 3 champions that are like the best into melee all-in supports because of how they function and how their kits are. So here, they banned Jax because Gragas was out, they didn't have an answer to Jax. Kesante was picked, they were very happy to have the Gwen side into Kesante, and then they dropped the Leona, and then the biggest value Braum is picked. Braum is pretty decent into Gwen, like you can apply your stacks, and then you can, like the stacks last, and the CC timing of the W of how it works is like pretty decent interaction. You can also E, root, and so forth, decent interaction. Looking at the other champs too, Rise, Vi, Varus, like these are champions that Braum is very, very happy to play against. And of course, Team Heretics composition was a just full-on front-to-back composition. You know, I think we saw the regular issues in the early game of Fnatic, but we're very happy to see that they were actually playing around top side. They found some dives, found some kill on Wukong, and they actually looked like they could actually win out the game with a much harder composition to execute, because the strength of this comp is together with Vi, Rise, and Gwen, and Leona. They're very strong in skirmishes, around 3v3s on mid, around top side. This is what they can leverage to find advantages, and then through split pushing, force the enemy to defend, to then take good space around areas to make the enemy face check into you. Right? This is a very common misconception about split pushing is it's easy to defend against split pushing, but you need to leverage the fact that the enemy is defending against your split pushing to gain superior positions in dragon fights and Nashor areas. If the enemy is contesting and trying to figure out ways to take space and be first on objectives, this is where you need to be hitting turrets and then pressuring the enemy base. This is how you disrupt compositions that are these death balls. This is what we saw the entire time at the World Championship when all the Eastern teams were slapping us LEC teams playing the tanks. We just wanted to group on mid and find engages. They were playing on split, forcing us to catch, and when we caught, they took the space and took the position because, of course, they see the side laners catching the waves on side. And when that happens, the advantage of making the enemy face check into you is something that they leverage so well through flanks and through disruptive angles used to attack these death balls. But this, of course, didn't happen. You know, a lot of situations happened, you know, where people got caught. Once again, some of the same issues with Reckless. He's not really like tethering appropriately in fights, I feel. I think that he's always positioning a little bit too far back, and I think, you know, his position is not tethered to where he needs to be in the position to others. Fnatic got caught on sides, and they were kind of overdoing it in the pushing. All in all, it felt easy to predict that the death ball composition that just needs to fight front to back is going to win. I thought that Mercer didn't have like the greatest game. I think that he made it a little bit more complicated. I didn't like how he positioned with his wall sometimes. I felt like Jack Spectre needed to be Houdini to survive situations, and you know, there was that one fight where he survived on 1 HP and bought so much time and space for his teammates, which of course was very important. I didn't like too much Ruby's build as well on Azir. He bought Deathcap 5th instead of on 4th. Like he bought Void Staff and Shadow Flame. Like it was not the greatest build. I think if you're playing Azir and you don't have Deathcap Void, when you have 4 items, most of the time your build is kind of wrong. you just lose way too much damage for not doing so. It's the equivalent of just not buying Infinity Edge on 3 with AD carries. In this game too, Ivan, he was getting caught a lot. He was crossing river when he's not supposed to, especially if your team is playing the split push game and they're contesting the neutrals on side. You can't really cross river. You just need to spot where the enemy is going and maybe hover behind your solo laners to be ready. And I think that Wunder did a good job of finding a lot of opportunities to hit turrets. I think in terms of structure damage, it was really, really up there. But then they kind of overdid it because I think they couldn't really figure out a way to play around the team fights, and they were very scared against the deathball composition that Team Heretic showed. This is a very tough look for Fnatic. I think their best hope is that they somehow make it through off of the back of the other teams just being weaker, right? Excellent Astralis not pulling through, and they just get through somehow on like 2 or 3 wins. That's like the prayer, right? And maybe in the best of 3, maybe the new meta is going to be helpful for them, but that is also a large dose of copium, because the best of 3 start quick, and to figure out a new patch when you have so many underlying issues is also something that can be very straining. Whenever you're in a team situation and you have to focus so much time and energy to make your structure make sense and keep everyone in the state of mind of commitment and keeping them in the right state of mind for the potential the group was set up for, then you're not really focusing on gameplay, and digging yourself out of those holes sometimes takes months. So this format is super, super cruel. Super cruel. We had a very eventful week. I would say LEC, like the amount of stakes we have in each match, is more interesting than ever. I really want to talk about the LEC format because I really, really want to make sure that people understand how difficult this format is and how having a healthy team environment is insanely broken. A lot of these teams that had less expectations on them could deal with their defeats and deal with their issues focused. If you lag behind and you need to focus time and energy on the culture and focus time and energy on making people be motivated and to make people work together and to find that commonality between the group, you have so little time to do so. This needs to be figured out in the off-season, and everyone needs to be on the same page about what you want to achieve. And I think SK and BDS, I think they are very great examples of that. I think that they put in a lot of hard work in the off-season, and it's paying off now. They had a very, very rough week 1, both teams did, and they bounced back in spectacular fashion. And I think this is very telling of what some of the challenges that some of the other teams like Fnatic, like Koi, like Excel are facing in this format. Because when the expectations are higher and the ego is higher, making it work, in that very short amount of time, where you have to only place 3 scrim days on the same patch and you have to deal with that defeat. If your group is not in the right state of mind, that can become very draining and exhausting very, very fast. And you can see some of these teams are just spiraling because you barely have any time to regroup. You play back-to-back-to-back matches, and then you have 1 break day where you can barely rest, 3 scrim days, and then rock and roll again. It is definitely, a format that rewards really, really good momentum and definitely punishes poor momentum. But at the end of the day, right, there's going to be 8 teams that go through. 2 teams are out. And as I mentioned before, the only blessing for some of these teams is that somehow there are teams below them that have managed to do worse. And there's definitely going to be teams completely limping into the best of 3 matches. But at least the teams will be able to scrim, they'll be able to reassess, and they'll be able to put in more time and effort to actually growing. And it won't be, you know, those windows won't be so narrow. On my end, I am going to do a LEC tier list. I'm going to do the predictions, and I'm going to talk about the meta and what we can expect in the format, and what teams I expect to be out and how I rate the teams. We're going to be recording that on Wednesday. Wednesday is a good date. And we will review the G2 Vitality game as we go. I am so tired, I'm not gonna lie. I felt like this is probably the one where I felt the least energetic. I haven't slept so well at this hotel. I think it's just how the mind works. You know, there was always a lot of noise here, and it was quite cold, but I feel blessed, you know. I feel very happy that I could be on the analyst desk, and I'm also happy that I can continue making content around the game that I love, and surrounding, you know, talking about players that I have history with and that, you know, I really enjoy watching. It's something that I want to hold on to forever. And you never know. Things, everything is temporary. So gotta enjoy it when you're in it, you know? Yeah. All right. That runs up the week. Rounds off the week. Yeah, I'm done, guys. I'm done. If you sneeze during this video, bless you and bless your face. I'll catch you guys some other time. Good night. And goodbye. Morning. I guess it's posted in the morning. Yeah, I'm done.